Good morning, and welcome to part two of the first installment of the VX Expat. My name is Tembi, also known as the New York City Girl Expat. And okay, where we left off, my friend helped me find an apartment by way of Facebook. FYI, if you are looking to relocate, not just abroad, but if you're looking to relocate anywhere, I suggest joining some local Facebook groups. They're very, very helpful. So I actually found something online by way of his cousin. Long story short, he was extremely supportive because he actually paid the deposit and acted as my reference. You know, it always helps to have somebody local, of course, being a foreigner. So when I arrived, now that I've arrived and we met up for dinner just to catch up or whatever. Now, at this point, 5 years had passed, okay? And it had been 5 years, and all of our communication was just by, a few WhatsApp messages here and there, just about, American politics. He loved, talk about politics and culture and things of that nature. And because I was abroad, the subject of his wife never came up. But now that I've come back and he had already been so instrumental in helping me get established, I needed to know the situation, okay? I needed to know what I was walking into, what the landscape was. I needed to know basically the parameters of our friendship so that I knew how to proceed and conduct myself. So we met up for dinner in Aix-en-Provence, and he said to me, and I asked him, I said, okay, so what happened with your wife? And he says to me, first off, she was not my wife. I have never been married. He says to me, I have never been married. We were never married. And he says to me, we were in a relationship, but our relationship had pretty much dissolved, and she was just still living with me until I was giving her the space and the time to find something else. So it was basically a financial reason why she was still living with him. And he said to me, we were carrying on with our lives. It's just that, it was difficult for her to move for financial reasons. So I'm thinking, okay, I still want to know how she got my telephone number. And he said to me, because in my head I'm thinking, okay, if she's his wife, maybe she went through his phone or whatever. And again, different relationships have different dynamics. And I'm learning that as a newlywed, that it really is up to the couple to decide and design your rhythm. So I said, because I want to know how she got my number. And he said, well, remember you were looking for a place? I said, yes. She told me when I asked her if she knew of anybody and I was helping someone look for a place, she told me that she knew of someone who had a place for rent and to give her your number. I said, oh, okay. So we're dealing with a seriously conniving person. But anywho, he says to me, actually, she moved out right after you left, and we haven't really spoken since. But I know that she basically moved in with the guy she was seeing at the time or whatever. So we got to talking and, of course, just catching up or whatever. And long story short, we just started spending more time together. He invited me out to his place in Nice to spend some time at his place in Nice. And, it was relatively close to where I lived before. So I was familiar with the area. We hung out in Nice, we'd meet up with his friends or whatever. And essentially, we were just testing the waters to see if we would be a good fit romantically. After about 6 weeks, he tells me that he wasn't feeling it, essentially. He says, I want to be in love and I'm not in love with you or whatever. Now, mind you, I am thinking to myself, love, okay? For me, love comes from respect, okay? Love comes from respect. Love comes from a certain sense of grounding, because that lovey-dovey feeling in the clouds thing, that comes and it goes. But I do understand that ultimately it has to be there in the start. Okay, it has to be there somewhere. So, I said, okay, well, remember, we're older. I mean, is that really, a priority, in terms of being and finding someone that you can count on, someone you respect, someone you can count on. The other stuff, in my opinion, this was my opinion at the time, can be developed. But anywho, if it's not working for one person, it's just not working. So went our separate ways, but he made it very clear that, he wanted to continue to support me in any way that I needed, and I let him know that I'd be there for him in any way that I could or whatever. And we continued our friendly communication, as far as everything was concerned. So that being said, I took that. I was disappointed, very clearly disappointed. Again, wasn't necessarily heartbroken because we weren't in love, but I was disappointed. Now, I had taken that disappointment as confirmation that I was meant to be single, because it had been close to 20 years since I had had a real relationship, for various reasons. And one of the reasons is that I always knew that I wanted a life abroad in some way, shape, or form. And I needed someone who fit that, or at least saw that. And in my experience, most people said that to go along with it, thinking that, oh, she'll forget about all these pipe dreams or whatever the case may be. So I always stuck to that. So here I am. And I said to myself, I have gone through some of the toughest things by myself. And maybe I'm just built to be single. Maybe I'm better off. After all, if I had been married, would I be here now? Well, that's my question. So, again, now at the time that this happened, we were nearing the holiday season. It was about a week or so, maybe a week or two before Thanksgiving. So it was in November. And of course, this just added to that feeling of feeling isolated, feeling alone, feeling very isolated in a new city. So, the disappointment, I decided, okay, well, clearly define what you want your future to look like. Now that you have crossed this major thing off your bucket list, what's the next step? And one of the things that I wrote down was that I wanted a home with a view of the Mediterranean Sea. And voila, here I am in a home with a loving husband sitting over the Mediterranean Sea. The other thing that I did as part of my, how do I say this, redirection, was at the time, I was taking art classes at the university. And one of the drills that we would do, which I found very, very interesting, was we would sketch a piece of art. We would sketch a piece of art, and we would be given, let's say, 3 minutes per page. So every 3 minutes, you turn the page and you start anew. You keep sketching the same thing over and over and over again. And the point of the exercise is to get yourself to stop thinking about it too much and to get into your creative flow. So I remember this. So I went back, and again, I was just kind of dealing with, okay, what do you want your future to look like? And whenever I would sketch, I would look for a piece of art with clean, simple lines, because I'm still a beginner. So I'm sketching, and I found a piece of art with a couple. Okay, so I was sketching, and that was the same day that I wrote down that I wanted to live on the Mediterranean Sea. And it's so interesting because, lo and behold, I am now part of a couple living on the Mediterranean Sea. So I share this story in hopes that uh, finding finding the inspiration or finding the way forward after disappointment. I actually just wrote a installment about another disappointment on my blog, so kind of turning that around. But I just find it so interesting because it was out of that I said to myself, I got clear. Okay, this chapter is closed. What does the next chapter look like? So just much like that drawing pad, and I'll see if I can insert a copy of the photo here, colorized copy. Think of it as a clean slate after disappointment. It's not disappointment, it's not destruction, it's a clean slate. Till next time, bye.